Welcome to Spark Sessions. I'm your host, Sonya Locke, and this girl is on fire. Today's guest is redefining how to lead with intelligence, elegance, and intention. She is Miss Georgia USA 2024 and newly graduated and board certified Family Nurse Practitioner from Emory University. From pageant stages to patients' rooms, Emmaline Farmer is blazing a bold and beautiful trail and showing the world we can serve with both a stethoscope and a crown. Emmaline, I'm so excited for you being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
You are such a force. I am so excited for our listeners to be able to hear your story and to talk about your journey. And you are living proof that both grace and grit can live in the same amazing woman and break down barriers. And I know I'm not the first, but I hopefully will not be the last. I really want to congratulate you on all of your accomplishments, and not only for being Miss Georgia USA, but becoming board certified as a family nurse practitioner. It's such a noble and amazing achievement. And
thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Cheers.
So let's start with talking about your roots. You know, what shaped you into the woman that you are today? I guess that first little spark.
Yes. So I'm from Winder, Georgia, a small town in Northeast Georgia, born and raised. Both my parents are also from Winder. Their parents are also from Winder. So I'm a small town girl, and I grew up working in my dad's pharmacies. So he owns a chain of independent pharmacies in my hometown called Farmer's Prescription Shop. And I grew up watching him and my grandfather work in the pharmacy. My grandfather was also a pharmacist as well. So I grew up watching them in the pharmacy. And so I think that's where my spark and a lot of my roots for service and serving others came from, was just from the familial example that I had in my life.
So is that where you fell in love with like nursing? Is that where your calling came from?
So I come from a family entirely made in the medical field. My mom's a dental hygienist, my dad's a pharmacist, my aunt's a nurse, my uncle's a PA. So the medical field was always something that was very familiar to me. But I wanted to do something on my own and step into my own path. And I really found that the field of nursing spoke to me. And now that I'm a board certified family nurse practitioner, I can definitely tell you that it was the perfect decision for me.
What was different about nursing than, say, becoming a doctor or a pharmacist or a PA?
So what spoke to me about nursing is, so for instance, when you're a patient, in the hospital, for example, when the doctor comes in, the doctor might come in, read your chart, make a plan, and then leave. But the nurses and the nurse practitioners are really the people who are sitting down with you, making connections with you, and getting that vital information to be able to advocate for you and your health. And so that's really what stood out to me about nursing, is just being able to make those deep connections with people on a personal level.
I think I've heard that from a lot of, and then also, let's be clear, family nurse practitioner is like a doctor. Most people, that's what they see nowadays.
Right. But because family nurse practitioners have a nursing background, they are known for just being more personable and being able to make more of a personal connection, because they have been a bedside nurse before and been able to see that side of it as well.
To really be able to serve and kind of get to know people and spend more time with them.
Yes.
Now let's talk about pageantry.
Yes.
When did you get into pageantry?
So when I was 10 years old, so my dad had a newspaper that came to our house every week. And every year, the Miss Barrow County Relay for Life pageant winners would be in the newspaper. And I would see the newspaper and beg my mom and dad to let me do it, because I wanted to wear the dress, I wanted to do the hair and makeup and have the crown and just do the whole thing. And for years they held me off. And finally, they let me do Miss Barrow County Relay for Life, and I was a hot mess. I wore this dark red junior bridesmaid's dress that I had. I had on red lipstick as like a 10-year-old. My hair was straight, and I definitely learned a lot in the fashion world from then to now. But I got first runner up in my first pageant. There was 3 girls. So, and the judges actually came up to my parents after the pageant, and they told them, they said, the only reason she got first runner up was just because she looked like she was having so much fun up there. And they said, y'all have got to take her to a dress store and get her a real pageant dress. And so they said, okay. And so they took me, and then I started kind of doing more fundraiser type pageants. And then by the time I was 12 years old, I won my first international pageant. I'd been competing in some state pageants, and then by the time I was 12, I won an international pageant called International Junior Miss Preteen.
Wow.
And so I was able to serve for a year with that pageant, which was, I was able to experience and travel. But I always knew that the Miss USA system was what I wanted to do. I went to my first Miss USA pageant when I was 10 years old. And I'll never forget Jasmine Wilkins, who is like a big time New York City supermodel now, but she won Miss Georgia USA that year. And I just always thought the girls on the Miss Georgia USA stage were just so glamorous, and that was always my dream. And so I knew that ultimately that's what I wanted to do. And I competed in Miss Georgia Teen USA twice in my high school years, which is like the teen version of the title I hold now. And I didn't win. I got in the top 5 both times, but I never captured the crown. And after that, I went off to college and kind of did my own thing, went to nursing school and really focused on school. But after that, I got the itch to come back, and I decided to come back after nursing school, and it was my first time in the Miss division, first time doing a pageant in 7 years, which was pretty scary. And so, but I was very lucky to win my first try, and it's been a dream ever since.
Wow, so you won your first try back after 7 years absence?
I did. It was an incredible feeling, and I never thought that would happen. My mom and I joked that this was supposed to be the practice round. It was just supposed to be practice this time, and then it wasn't practice. So.
What drove you back? What made you feel like you needed to come back to pageantry?
Yeah, I just felt like I was at a time in my life. I had some academics out of the way. I had my first degree completed, and I just kind of felt like it was time. I wanted to give it one more shot. Even when I was competing as a teenager, I always looked at the Miss girls and thought they were just even more glamorous like that. So competing in Miss Georgia USA was always my goal, just because I thought those women were so beautiful, intelligent, smart, strong, just everything, the full package. And so that was always my dream. And so I knew that eventually I wanted to at least go give that one shot.
Did you get a new dress?
I did. So it's funny because the Miss Georgia USA pageant I competed in was supposed to be held in November of 2023. So I actually got my dress even a while before then. So I had my dress for a while, and I had started nurse practitioner school at Emory in August of 2023. And so I just thought I was going to juggle it and make it work. And I go to my first day of class, and they tell us that you have one mandatory day that you have to be in class. And it was Miss Georgia USA Day that I was supposed to be at Emory. And so I was devastated. I thought I would have to wait a whole year. I'd already bought a dress. I had my interview outfit. I had everything ready to go. So I thought I would have to wait a whole nother year. And then a couple weeks later, I got an email from Miss Georgia USA saying they were actually moving it to June. So June 2024. So if Miss Georgia USA had been on the original date, I would have never been able to compete. So I really thought that was, a God thing that I was able to, that all the things worked out on that part.
Well, I think it is probably a God thing or a heart thing for both of your passions, from going to nurse practitioner school to also going into pageantry.
Absolutely.
And tell me a little bit about what drew you to the Miss USA pageantry that was different, I guess, from the other ones. Yeah,
I think, the Miss USA organization really emphasizes that women can be smart and beautiful. When I grew up watching the Miss USA pageant as well on TV. And I started watching when I was 10 years old. I watched every year at home with my mom. We would have Miss USA watch parties at home. And I would see these women on the stage, and they were doctors, lawyers, astronauts, you name it. That woman was on the stage. And so it was really inspiring to me as I was a young woman deciding what I was going to do when I grew up, when I was growing up watching the pageant. And I think the Miss USA pageant really taught me that I could do whatever I set my mind to.
And you didn't have to shut one part of yourself down to be another brilliant, caring professional as well. So, oh, that's really good. So tell me about service. So winning a pageant isn't just you go in there and get your sash and crown and then goodbye, right? You are service for like a full year after.
Right. So I partner with the American Heart Association. That's an organization that I've been with for a while now. I got involved to begin with the American Heart Association because cardiovascular disease is not only the leading cause of death in our country, it's the leading cause of death in my family. So when I was in nursing school, I'll never forget that I was listening to a lecture from one of my professors on cardiovascular disease, and she was describing the symptoms, and a light bulb went off in my head that she was describing my father. And I went home and I told my dad about what I had learned that day, and he ended up in the hospital and had 3 cardiac stents implanted, which is a heart procedure. And so yeah, that really opened my eyes to cardiovascular disease, what people might not know about it. And as I dug deeper into learning about it more in nursing school, I learned about how it's hereditary and it might not show immediate signs. And so I sought care and had a physical that year and learned that I had, at 21 years old, active 21-year-old, had severely elevated cholesterol levels, which put me at direct risk for heart disease. So with my work with the American Heart Association this year, I've really just been trying to share the message that heart disease can come in all ages, shapes, and sizes, and heart disease could even look just like me.
That's beautiful. And also I think it shows like, your roots and your spark to begin with. You've always led with heart, not to be a pun, because we're talking, but truthfully, like coming from the heart, and I mean, that's a great passion to now be able to educate other people on how to look for the signs and hopefully, save their lives and stuff. So we talked about the spark, which I think leads perfectly into the next part, which is one of the signature sessions for Spark Sessions, or signature parts of Spark Sessions, is the fire starter moment, when your passion met your purpose. And so when, with these two worlds colliding, and you're working with the American Heart Association, going to your nurse practitioner school, when did you feel like this all kind of clicked? When your passion became your purpose, and your presence, and where you've kind of stepped into your own power?
Right. So when I decided I was going to go back for Miss Georgia USA and prepare, I knew that I needed to become involved with an organization. And around all that same time was when I was in nursing school, learning about cardiovascular disease, having my own experience, my dad's experience. So all of that really happened around the same time, and was obviously a huge spark for me to become involved in the American Heart Association. And then when I started nurse practitioner school, I kind of went in with a fire to even learn more, just so that when I was on the stage at Miss Georgia USA or seeing a patient in school, that I could just have all the knowledge and information that I was able to give them.
And that's a lot nurse practitioner school is not really a joke, right? It is a very intense moment of your life, right?
Right.
So how did you blend those two?
Yes. So when I was preparing for Miss Georgia USA and Miss USA, I was in nurse practitioner school the whole time. I was in Emory University's Family Nurse Practitioner program. It was a 4-semester program. And so during 2 full semesters, I was full pageant prep mode while I was in school. So it was definitely very challenging. I'm not going to lie to you. There were many late nights and many early mornings. I was going to clinical every day test, in-person labs in Atlanta, an hour away from my house. So it was juggling a lot. And then when I won Miss Georgia USA, I realized I had my next semester was, so semester number 2 was going to be tied up with pageant as well. And I really just tried to balance it all. First and foremost, my school always came first. And that's something that I tried to keep myself grounded with, and that my parents would just reinforce to me as well. When a lot of pageant stuff was going on, and maybe I was worrying about things I shouldn't be worrying about or out of my control, they would just always remind me that your school and your education is what should always come first. So that was definitely like a anchor to my mind during that time. But I competed in Miss USA. I remember I was studying for a final on the way to compete for Miss USA and on the flight home. And the day I came home from Los Angeles, I took a nurse practitioner final. So
oh, wow.
It was just all a balancing act. But I'll tell you, in December, when I walked across that stage and got my diploma, it was one of the most, accomplished feelings that I've ever had. And then I passed my boards, and so I did it. I came home from passing my boards, and it was a celebration for not only me, my whole family. We were like, oh, we did it, all of us. So.
I mean, that's a lot. And I mean, so tell me a little bit about what the Miss USA pageant was like. I mean, so you're full-time in nursing, nurse practitioner school. And then I imagine Miss USA is not like a, show up on a Saturday and just, and do an interview, right?
So I won Miss Georgia USA in June, and I had 6 weeks until I went to Los Angeles for the Miss USA pageant. So that is like record time. I don't know which I might be wrong, but I don't know if any queen has ever had that short amount of time. Usually you have 6 months, not 6 weeks. So it was definitely a challenge. And kind of the day after I won Miss Georgia USA, I realized that in 6 weeks I was going to the Super Bowl of pageantry. So I really had to get to work, and it was definitely a team effort. My mom and my sister were very big helpers in those 6 weeks, and planning all the outfits and getting everything ready. And I flew to Los Angeles, and I had so many bags. We were so nervous about how we were gonna take all my things. And so I flew to Los Angeles with my gown in my lap just so it wouldn't get lost, and with some hat I had to wear on my head. So it took a whole village, and I'm very thankful for the village that got me there. And when I arrived in Los Angeles, it was everything I had hoped it would be, meeting all the women from across our country. And we had the iconic sashing ceremony, which is when you get your Georgia sash that I've seen on women for 20 years now and dreamed of that being on me. So that was a very special moment for me. And it was very fun meeting all the girls and just experiencing it all. We got to travel around Los Angeles, which was fun, but it wasn't all fun and games. I mean, we probably went to bed every night around midnight. We had to be up at 4 a.m. for hair and makeup. It was long rehearsals. We had a pretty rigorous interview process as well. But all of that was worth it when I was able to walk across the Miss USA stage with Georgia across my chest.
And then also come back and then walk across another stage to get your nurse practitioners.
My diploma, yep. Both of them felt equally as good.
That is, I mean, it's such a unique blend of two passions kind of coming together in a unique way. And do you feel like you've come into your power? And
definitely, I think one of the main things that my whole journey in pageantry in my older life has taught me is just having confidence in myself and believing I can do it. When I was preparing for the pageants, I would spend hours in my room preparing for interview, searching online, doing interview lessons, just studying my notes for hours and hours. Probably when I was supposed to be studying my nurse practitioner notes. But, when I finally did win Miss Georgia USA, it was just a realization and finding my power that, if I work hard enough that I can accomplish, really anything I set my mind to, which was a big revelation in my life. And I know something that I'll be able to take with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and actually you have two very rare statistics. So one, I was trying to look up the acceptance rate at Emory for the nurse practitioner program, which I believe is like 11%, which is like less than UPenn and Duke and everywhere else. Is one of the hardest programs in the country to get into.
Right. And I'll tell you, going off that statistic, so when I was applying for undergraduate nursing school, I got denied twice to nursing school. So I was trying to get into this certain nursing school in Georgia, and it was a pretty difficult one to get into. And I got denied from nursing school twice, and then I ended up going to Augusta's nursing school, which then led me to going to Emory's nurse practitioner program. And so I think that's also kind of a lesson in a story, just to never give up, because, if I had let those two denials get in the way of me chasing after my dreams, I might not be sitting here today.
No, I think that is very powerful, because you knew that that was your purpose, right? You knew that that's what you were going to be, and you have to step through those tribulations and rejections and everything else. And then another one is like on the Miss USA, I think that they say that, what is it? You have more chances of your son playing in the Super Bowl than you do in your daughter being in the Miss USA pageant.
Oh yes, the pageant girls love that statistic. It's a good one.
Because it's very few that make it there. You're representing the state of Georgia for the whole United States. I mean, that must be also a very proud moment as well.
Definitely. And I was very fortunate enough to have a lot of family be able to come out to Los Angeles and support me, which was very fun having all of them there. And my hometown of Winder actually was so supportive of me during this time. I can be in Winder today, and I can be at the grocery store. I can be working at my dad's pharmacy, and people will come through the drive-through window, and I don't even know them, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're Miss Georgia. We watched you on TV." And so it's really special. And I've been able to do super fun things in my hometown, like lighting our town's Christmas tree and being in parades. So it's been really special to kind of connect with my hometown that way as well.
And do you get to visit the hospitals, I assume, as Miss Georgia?
Yes.
And work with patients and stuff as well?
So I visited a hospital pediatric unit, which was very fun. And so
that's wonderful. So we kind of started into this, talking about like the challenges, and I like to call this segment the trial by fire. So every queen, every change maker, they go through these different trials and tribulations that make them who they are. I'm sure you faced a lot of, stereotypes, resistance, as well as an extreme challenge of trying to be a perfectionist in two completely different worlds, one of medicine and one of beauty.
Right.
How did you persevere through? And tell me some about those tribulations and what knowledge you can pass forward.
Yes, so I definitely would agree with you that I was definitely trying to be a perfectionist in two different worlds, and what that caused me was, some self-doubt, as anyone would. I'm competing in, pageantry. I'm competing in a sport where you're competing against other women just merely on who can talk the best, who can walk the best, who can look the best. But there's also so many other things that go into that. And that definitely led to feelings of insecurity, self-doubt. Am I good enough to do this? Will I be able to do this? Which also led to self-doubt with my medical career. Should I be doing these two things at the same time? Is this a bad idea? Should I wait until I've graduated? So I definitely would say that self-doubt would be my biggest struggle in my road to Miss Georgia USA and Miss USA. But really what got me through those times of self-doubt was just being grounded in my faith and my family. And, I think when I start worrying about all these things that, I shouldn't be worrying about and in the big picture don't matter, my family is really good at bringing me back down and bringing me back to reality.
Well, I can say it's actually funny, because I only had one time where I talked about the imposter syndrome, but it has come up with every single episode that we've done. And I have just been at 3 different conferences, 3 different women's conferences and the Time Summit. And the imposter syndrome is prevalent, I think, so much on every woman, right?
Absolutely.
It is that self-doubt, the, am I supposed to be here?
Right.
And not feeling worthy,
Right.
And so how do you quiet that noise? I mean, you say about your family and
Yeah.
stuff, but a lot of times you're by yourself having to try to pump yourself up.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, taking care of yourself is a big thing, mentally, physically, spiritually. Some things that work for me are walking 10,000 steps a day. So that is like my form of exercise, my form of peace. I walk my dog every day, and we don't quite make it to 10,000 with my little dog, but we get close. But I just put in my earbuds, I listen to worship music, or I'll listen to my favorite podcast, which is these two sisters who talk about pop culture, and I just walk. I live in an area with lots of land and walking trails, and so that's really where I find my peace. So if I start to feel anxious, you will find me outside walking.
No, that's very good at being in touch with nature as well, right? What about burnout? 50% of nursing students, and you went through nursing and family nurse practitioner, experience burnout, especially under 30, which you are.
Right, yeah.
And then, like said, doing pageantry on top of this. How did you face burnout?
Absolutely. So I think that the 6 weeks after Miss Georgia to Miss USA, I kind of blacked out. Like, I don't remember much from that time because I was just working so hard in school and in pageantry. I'll tell you that when I got home from Miss USA, I had 2 weeks off of school, and I got home from Miss USA and everything was quiet. And that's kind of when I had like my moment where I was just so burnt out, and I was facing my last semester of nurse practitioner school. And I had just gone, just through so many emotions for the past 6 weeks. And so that's really when I had my moment for a couple days, and I really just leaned on family and friends, and they helped me get through it. And once I started school again and got into a regular routine, I was perfectly fine and loving life.
Well, I mean, you're also Gen Z, and I think that you guys are also very hard on yourself. And I don't know if a lot of it is from social media and having the world's problems in your face at all times. Is there, how do you, what do you think is some of the cause of that? Do you think that sometimes it is from all the outside world and all the problems, or do you think it was just because of what you were going through at that moment, which was intense?
Absolutely. It's definitely from social media. There is 100% a social media issue with my generation. 7 out of 10 adults today are struggling with anxiety or depression. And, I think a lot of it is from social media. When you get on those apps, you are just seeing what everyone posts as their highlight reel. Their best moment of the day is going on Instagram. And if you're sitting at home, maybe not having a good day, or if you're sitting at home just not having a fabulous moment, and you see, people on Instagram sharing their most fabulous, perfectly edited moments, it makes you feel like, oh, what am I doing? Why don't I have that? And I call it the highlight reel. Everyone just posts their highlight reels. And that's something that I struggle with, comparing to other people's highlight reels. And, I think 100% of my generation probably struggles with that as well. So I think, ways to combat that are speaking out about it like this, encouraging people to be more vulnerable on social media. And so hopefully we can, stand strong together and try to make a change in social media.
I think that is, being authentic, right? Instead of, like you said, highlight reels. Someone else called it the microwave culture, right? And I mean, I've heard a lot of different expressions, and it is a really relevant problem in our society. And I mean, you had to film highlight reels, right? For Miss USA.
Absolutely. I was highlight reeling it up, but I tried to also share the real moments as well. So I was posting all the glam shots, don't get me wrong, but I also tried to show, when I was having a bad day, and so I tried to equal it out a little bit.
No, I think that's very important, and having a platform that you can say that to people.
Right.
So what advice would you give to this generation, especially the generation coming up even now, like the Gen Alphas, right? They are constantly, I mean, it's like basically, I think it's part of their hand as their phones, you know?
Yeah, it's tough. It's, I like that I'm starting to see schools say that, you know, up to a certain grade level, you can't have your phone at your desk with you at school, and things like that. And, you know, when you're a middle schooler and high schooler, before you get out of the house, I think parents also, you know, encouraging their children to take time off of social media, having parameters set around social media, whatever those may be. And then as far as like college kids and young adults, and even adults, I just think it's about setting personal boundaries. So I know something that I will do is you can set timers on your phone. So I can set a 1 hour timer on Instagram. And after I spend an hour on Instagram for the day, it could be 9 o'clock in the morning. It's off until the next day. So that's something that's helped me, just not to stay on my phone too much and try to be present in the moment.
That's great advice. Great advice. So now I want to get a little bit beyond just your personal journey and ask one of the key segments, which is the burning question, is why in today's society in 2025 are people still stunned that someone can be both brilliant and beautiful and be, you know, like you are a beautiful woman. When you walk in the room, you can command a presence, but you're also highly intellectual. We've already talked about your statistics and your faith and everything that you have been saying so far today. But I don't think society necessarily does that, right? Society, it's like you're one or the other and almost forcing women to kind of shut down one side.
Right.
Why do you think that is, and how has maybe some of your journey helped?
You know, sadly, I just think it's the stigma for women and beautiful women who are also intelligent that we've been living with for all of time. You know, I think that pageantry is an excellent way to combat this stigma and be able to show the world how beautiful women, you know, like I said before, can be doctors, lawyers, astronauts, you know, whatever they want to be. And it's also something that I've tried to focus on during my reign as Miss Georgia USA, and just try to be an example to young girls, young adults all across our state of Georgia that you can be both.
And you don't have to give up your stilettos for scrubs. You can wear them both, right?
You can wear both. I never have, but
that would be probably a little bit dangerous. So how did you kind of embrace who you were as a person? You obviously, no one pushed you into pageantry. You went into it because you wanted to be that.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh, yes.
And obviously, like I said, you're highly gifted to get into some place like Emory and to graduate so quickly and get your board certification, which I know is a very difficult exam. You know, how have you navigated those two worlds? And do you feel sometimes you have to walk into a room and say, no, wait a minute, I am also smart? You know?
Absolutely. So, you know, through nursing school and nurse practitioner school, you know, those feelings, of course, have always gone through my mind. When I remember in nursing school, when I would go to clinical, I would like try to wear no makeup, wear my glasses, like have my mask on, and just try to be like an under the radar student. But, you know, something that I think pageantry has really taught me is that even though society tells us that they can't, that beauty and intelligence can live in the same world, and you don't have to dim one light to brighten another. So those two things can exist at the same time. And, you know, women in our country, they should be so proud if they are able to have both. And
beauty comes in all shapes, sizes, and colors, and everything else.
Of course.
But yes, I do feel like you said, having to, you know, try to downplay who you are. That's where I think is the message is that we need to own the parts of us that are who we are and make them stronger, not try to dim them.
Right, because, you know, those things work better together, you know, and so, you know, like I said before, you don't have to dim one light to brighten another.
So what do you think we can do as society more enlarged to make that voice heard aside from like the social media side as well,
Right.
being vulnerable on social media, that's a very big part of it.
Right.
Not always being glammed up on that, but
Right.
being vulnerable. What other things can you think of that
I think
you would say?
all women who are in this position, just being an example to others on how society views women. So when I am with my patients, or even at the grocery store, just always treating people with kindness and love, and being an example to where they can't stigmatize us anymore.
And let me ask you another maybe controversial question, because I've heard this one a lot too. Where do you feel like you get more of the judgment? From other women or from men? In terms of
honestly, probably
criticism?
from women.
I believe so too. I think that's where it's like, that's where really is this empowering.
Yeah, it is. I think more, in the pageant world, it's all women, so they're
Right.
accustomed to that. But in the medical world, I definitely would say women. And so, what I can do going forward is just try to be an example for my next generation to hopefully not take that trait on to the next.
And build the rungs for the next generation.
Right.
Right? To where we say it's like, I wrote an article on this too. I called it the White Lotus effect, right?
Yeah.
Where once the girl walks out of the room, the others start talking about them, right? But we should learn to be saying congratulations. Like there is plenty of room at the table. If not, build a bigger table. Don't try to hold that seat. And I think that's where you do get a lot of this.
Yeah.
But
and I think, as women, all we can do now really is do exactly what you said and just try to set an example for others every day, and hope and pray that the movement spreads.
Well, Emmaline, you've set a beautiful example, not only with your heart, but with all of your accomplishments. I mean, you really have, you're a very positive light and energy. And I think, like said, hopefully that passes on. It's the ripple effects.
Right.
And I think with your crown, you probably have had a lot of ripple effects amongst young women and young girls.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit about a lot of your pressures all throughout your very young career. And so let's talk a little bit about fanning the flames. That's one of the things, is that you have to have fuel to survive, especially to get through all the challenges that you've had. So let's talk about what are some of those things that help fan the flames for you and keeps your fire burning at those deepest hours?
Yeah, absolutely. My faith. I was lucky enough to be raised as a Christian and go to a Christian school. So the Bible is very ingrained in me and what keeps me going during dark times. And, I think when I'm feeling anxious, the scripture is what I revert back to and what God tells us in the Bible. I also think having a community of people around you, of people like-minded. So for me, that's believers, and being able to lean on people for support during those times is very important. And also not being scared to seek professional help. I think that there is a stigma around seeking professional help for mental health, but I think our generation is doing a great job at breaking down that barrier for sure, versus 10, 20 years ago. But I think not being afraid to seek help, whether that's from a doctor, a therapist, everyone has felt these feelings, and it's nothing to be ashamed about and nothing to be afraid to help yourself about.
No, I think that's so very important. And you're right, your generation is the first one. When we talked about it, I guess they're getting labeled as too sensitive, but it's not too sensitive. Mental health is very important. I mean, you said 7 out of 10 suffer from anxiety or mental health issues and stuff. So what are some ways that we can kind of recognize those signs in others, or get them to the help, I guess, that they need?
Yeah. I've struggled with anxiety now for probably about 10 years. And I've taken prescription medication for it. I've sought therapy. So I've tried a lot of different things. And so I think, like I said, advising people not to be afraid to seek help. And, as far as like recognizing signs, I think some signs in nurse practitioner school for depression that I've learned about is like excess sleep or little sleep, excess eating, little eating, just an overall change in mood. And, I think if we can help get these resources out to parents of young children or young adults, they can recognize these diseases better and be able to help their loved ones if their loved ones can't exactly recognize what's happening at the time.
And I think also too, just talking about it, like you aren't embarrassed to say, hey, I've suffered from anxiety.
Right.
I've done these things to help cope with that. It's nothing to be embarrassed of.
Yeah,
it is all of our lives, right?
Yeah. Everyone has had those feelings.
Well, I don't think, it's clear that all of your wisdom and you having a stage, both and in the pageants and at the hospitals, I think it's important that you have that stage because you have a lot of wise advice.
Yeah, I hope that, I've been able to spread this message to women in pageantry and also spread it to just my patients every day. So working on just lessening the stigma and making an impact on mental health.
And I think that you definitely have done that. And I think that it was definitely your calling on both sides, that you have a very clear purpose that because, your faith has brought you to.
The people I see every day are struggling with mental health maybe struggling with anxiety with completely different reasons than women in pageantry are, but both are very, high anxious places. And so I feel like I've been able to speak to two different crowds about it.
So the next section is one of our very signature parts of Spark sessions, and that's called passing the torch. But I kind of feel like with you, it's a little different because usually I ask what you'd say to a younger generation, but you're actually kind of carrying the torch. Not only is Miss Georgia, which your reign is about to end, but now you're starting a new career in medicine. And I want to talk about like what you feel like your legacy is and your impact that you feel like you've made or want to continue to make on both worlds.
Yeah, so something I haven't touched on yet that I'm very passionate about is women's health. When, like we talked about my story with heart health, my dad's experience, my own experience, it got me to dive into women's health. And what I discovered is that only 38% of cardiovascular research is performed on women, which is very low. And what people might not know is that women present with symptoms of a heart attack that are completely different from men. So men will have the traditional symptoms: chest pain, shortness of breath, might be shoulder pain, what you see in the movies. And women might have, shortness of breath, headache, rapid heart. So, a lot of times women come in with heart attack symptoms and doctors think they're having an anxiety attack. And they get sent home and they have a heart attack. So something that I have really loved to talk about during my reign as Miss Georgia is just women's health equality in funding, in research, in hopes to make an impact on that sphere because it's very much needed.
Oh, it's very much needed. Not talking about that, but menopause is having a thing right now, right? Because there is zero research done on that. It's all like, oh, go take a bath, you're fine. But actually with heart disease, that is a huge problem. And I know
one killer in our country.
Yes, and also amongst women. And most of the time women will have a sudden death from it. I've been where my uncle actually had 6 bypasses. And there was a woman, young, 50, in ICU, and they say that because they're not seen for the same symptoms. So what are some of the ways that you've worked to help with women equality, and what are ways that you want to continue to work with it?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, just being an educator to my patients each and every day. Being able to talk to women about their specific signs and symptoms. I've been able to use my platform as Miss Georgia to spread this message in various ways. Before I went to Miss USA, I did like a little segment on my Instagram, and it was called Women's Health Tips. And it was just a couple little videos about different women's health topics like your mammogram, your pap smear, the cardiovascular symptoms that are different from men. And because, they just might not be getting this information any other way. And so hopefully I've been able to reach some women through that, and will continue to reach women every day through my job.
I'm sure that you will continue to reach them. You also did another important thing during your reign. You passed a bill in the state of Georgia. How did you do that?
I know, that was very exciting. So have you seen the TV show Scandal?
Yes.
So this was my Olivia Pope moment when I went to, I was with the American Heart Association, and we lobbied for House Bill 874, and which provided cardiac emergency response plans and supplies in all Georgia schools. So it required every Georgia public school to have a plan set in place for not if, but when a cardiovascular event happens on campus. So this could be a student, a school employee, a parent. And so I lobbied to my state and House representatives, and it was very fun. One of them told me no, but and it passed, which was very exciting. And it was, a really thrilling experience to be a woman in medicine and be able to make this difference.
Did you get to go up to see it get signed as a law
No,
bill?
I just heard the news. I know, that would have been fun.
No, but that's amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. So what other advice would you give either to your younger self, or maybe I think you have a younger sister as well?
Yes.
Of what is advice to give to the next generation? What is what you want to say?
I think that you don't have to dim yourself down to make others uncomfortable. Kind of what we talked about earlier. What makes you different makes you special, it makes you beautiful, it makes you powerful. And what you're looking for in life, it's not out there, it's within you. And, I just think all of those things are phrases that help with just the self-doubt that I think my generation and the generation to come may be feeling.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I'm very excited about you going into medicine, because I think that you'll touch a lot of lives. And a lot of it is also about the ripple effects.
Right.
You can't change the whole world, but if you can change 10 people's lives and those people change lives, that's what's very important. So I really think that you're not just taking the torch, but you're lighting a new path. And what else anything else that you would want to say to future leaders like you, or what are you going to say to the new Miss Georgia when you pass off your crown in June? What are some advice that you're going to give her?
I think a character trait that I always try to do, and my advice for others is just to be empathetic to all. I grew up like we said before, I grew up in my dad's pharmacy. I watched him and my grandfather, take the time to speak with each patient, make them feel seen, make them feel heard, and comfortable. And so to the next Miss Georgia USA, when you meet people, because you're going to have all these glamorous appearances and do all these glamorous things, but when you meet people, they are just gonna be so excited to meet you. And just taking the time to sit with people, hear their story, make them feel seen and heard, because you'll be making their day when you do so.
Okay, so you've led with some very powerful truths, and I think some great tidbits and stuff for the next generation. And now it's time for us to have a little bit of fun, and this is the fire round. So first thought that comes in your head, super simple questions, okay? All right, scrubs or stilettos?
Scrubs.
Go-to confidence song, either for pageants or studying for one of your exams?
Anything from Sabrina Carpenter's new album.
What's the one thing in your bag no matter where you're going?
Fenty lip gloss.
I need to go pick up some of that.
You do?
Early riser or night owl?
Early riser, have to be.
What's your go-to self-care ritual at the end of the day?
Reality TV and pasta.
Okay, favorite reality TV show?
The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I know.
This might be the same question. What's your guilty pleasure?
My mom's chocolate pie.
And one beauty product you swear by?
Hydrofacials. I've been able to get them from Miss Georgia USA, so they're ending soon, but I'm savoring them.
Oh, no. And I bet there's probably not a lot of places in Winder for that, or is there?
No, I have to travel for the hydrofacial.
How big is Winder, by the way? How many people do you have live there?
Gosh, I don't know. To be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I was having to look it up on the map.
It's not a tiny, tiny town, but I think it's a small town.
Yes. Well, thank you for showing us your heart and your fun side as well. All right, so we've had some fun here today, but I want to leave our listeners with like the final spark, I like to say. So Emmaline, what is your true spark? What is that truth or belief that carries you forward from day in and day out to where you're going?
When I think about what carries me forward, it really is the future and my family. I am very, very lucky to have a family that I adore, who supports me in all that I do, and who I just have fun with. We're all very close, and that is my guiding force on bad days. That's what keeps me afloat. And if I were to be so lucky to be able to have a family one day, I would work as hard as I can to be able to give them the life that and the experiences that I've been given. So that's my spark, and that's what keeps me going.
And Emmaline, you are beautiful. You definitely light up any room that you walk into. And I thank you so much for being here today and sharing your brilliance and your beauty. You know, you're both science and soul, and you are truly a most beautiful person inside and out. And I thank you very much for keeping the Spark sessions going.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
Thank you for tuning in to Spark Sessions. Until next time, keep the fire burning.